Here are 10 official political parties in Japan, so let's talk about which party people support. But before we get into the data, let's just state the obvious. In Japan, the Liberal Democratic Party, or the LDP, has been the main ruling party since 1955, and this was only interrupted for roughly 5 years. This means that they have an extremely high election win ratio. This also suggests that the majority of Japanese people support the LDP. But in reality, the LDP is benefiting from Japan's broken system, thus maintaining their claim to the throne, and longevity can easily deceive others that they truly represent the will of the people. Yup, that includes one of the mistakes I made in my previous video as well. In the All Japanese Political Parties Explained video, I used each party's parliament representation rate as the party support rate. So let's review how the LDP maintains their grip of power in Japanese politics. But before jumping into their secret, here's an extremely simplified political spectrum of the parties. Let's first review each party's parliament seat numbers. All of these parties are nationally approved political parties, which means they have at least 2% representation in a previous election. This is what the lower house looks like when it comes to party representation. Let's take a look at the upper house. Here are some generalizations. The main ruling party has roughly 50% of both houses. Given their coalition with the Komeii party, the ruling parties combined have around 60%. The main opposition party, the Constitutional Democratic Party, has roughly 20% of the seats. The second largest opposition party, the Japan Innovation Party, has around 10%. The other parties lag between 2 to 5%. So with these numbers in mind, let's compare the seats to the approval rate. While the LDP is still leading, their approval rate is near 30%. The other parties, including the main opposition party, range from 2 to 5%. All parties are inflated other than the Reiwa Party, which has a 1.8% approval rate and 2% representation in the upper house. So what might explain this discrepancy, and how is the LDP using this to their advantage? First, the voting system disrupts true representation. Japan utilizes a mixed system voting system, which means that there are voting blocks that only select one representative and proportional elections that select multiple representatives. In a single member district, the person with the most votes among the competitors wins the election. Given that the LDP has the largest approval rate, it's likely that they can easily win in many single-member districts, thus resulting in a nationwide majority in the parliament. In a country that uses pure FPTP like America, over time, there should only be 2 political parties. However, proportional representation, which allows multiple winners, provides small parties a method to survive. The survival of small parties means that small parties have no incentive to dissolve even if they lose in a single-member district. When the two systems are combined in the lower house, this provides an edge to the LDP. Second, the current voting system encourages strategic voting, but to an extreme degree. Again, given that certain districts only allow one winner, opponents of the LDP need to be careful. Even if voters like a Reiwa representative, there is a high likelihood that their candidate will lose in the election. Therefore, many may end up voting for the CDP even if they disagree with the CDP's political agenda. This might explain the CDP's inflated numbers as well. If strategic voting is true, this could also threaten the CDP, as any party could try to replace the best opposition party seat. Therefore, all parties are fighting one another rather than the party with the highest win ratio. Third, the number of non-affiliation. 40% of voters have no particular party they support, which means that 40% of eligible voters are swing voters. If all of them vote for, say, the JCP, they can easily make Japan a communist country. Of course, because there is no party that these people support, there is no guarantee that they will vote. They might vote against certain parties or vote based on an election year or policy. As a matter of fact, Japan's voter turnout for the lower house, which determines the prime minister, was 55% for the previous election. 10 years ago, voter turnout was around 70%. If only 55% of eligible voters are voting and 30% of them vote for the LDP, that should get the LDP roughly 60% of seats in the parliament. This also means that roughly a third of the country is deciding the fate of the country because almost half of the population don't vote or have a particular party to support. Obviously, there are other factors that explain the LDP's dominance, such as history and political apathy, but here are some systematic reasons how the LDP can remain in power. The beauty of democracy is the ability to vote or not vote, as not going to the polls is also a democratic expression of disapproval. However, this also means that citizens have no right to complain because, when united, they have the power to change any administration. Regardless of such power, I also understand that all opposition parties lack a certain appeal. It's common to hear complaints that there is no viable alternative to the LDP, so check out this video to better understand all parties and their general policy proposals.